Looking for some inspiration to help you in your struggle with the fear of invisibility and wanting to hear that you're not alone? Then you're in luck, because this is my personal story and journey with the fear of invisibility. So let's get into it. So a part of me has always felt like a side character born into the epilogue of a Lifetime original movie. There was just a lot of drama and things that happened in my parents' and my sister's lives long before I was born. So by the time I was born, there was just like the remnants of the wreckage of that. And they were also older, leading their lives. And so there was just a sense that I was an extra, that I had to figure out what happened in that movie to be able to have a say or a place in it. And I was always behind trying to find that place. There was, and then there was other complications, like when I got my head injury, and that delayed my speech and my development for several years, and just things like that. So as a child, though, I didn't really notice the fear part of being invisible. Like, I knew I was invisible, but I didn't necessarily knew that was something I was pushing against. It kind of felt more like a superpower when I was little, because I could get away with anything. I was very explorative, and my mom let me out, and so I loved exploring wherever I wanted in the apartment complex, hanging out with friends, make believe. All of that worked really well because adults didn't interfere with me. So there was a benefit to that, to be able to just go hide in a corner and read a book, and then everyone would leave me alone. I liked that as a kid. But once I hit adulthood and motherhood specifically, I really started feeling that weight of the fear part of being invisible. That there's this core part of me that's just afraid of being invisible, because that meant underlining it, that meant I had no value, that there was no intrinsic worth, that if I didn't make some grand splash or anything, or be able to get people's attention to remember me, I wasn't going to be remembered. That my time on this earth wouldn't mean anything. And I really started feeling the weight of that in, my late teens and in my 20s. And so I dealt with that by seeking external worth. Now, I would like to add, it didn't help that I really got into my faith at this time. And I've done another video about my relationship with the verse that your heart is deceitfully wicked, and who can know it, that you're not supposed to trust your heart, those verses. So I've done another video on that if you want to check it out. But so I also had that going for me, that I didn't know if I had intrinsic worth. And I also was receiving a verse being taught to me, telling me I couldn't even trust myself to even look for it. So I went outward. I looked for external sources, like, did the Bible tell me so? What does my husband think of this? What does the church think of this? Do people care? Like, pat me on the head, right? And so that is a very exhausting way to live your life, because you're ignoring your basic place of where you're supposed to be getting your understanding. So instead of just looking inward and being able to have that sense of stability, I kept trying to outsource it outward. And that was exhausting. And it resulted in massively increases in anxiety, ruminations. I built up over the years a really huge beast narrative of, interactions and people and the whole invisible thing. Like, this person didn't remember that I was at this event. This person doesn't care. This person, like, we were friends and they walked away. Just story after story and story built on this whole big thing on, I'm invisible, I don't have any intrinsic worth, and I need to do something to make sure I have some kind of value, because I have no value in myself. And that beast narrative, which I call it a beast narrative because that's what my husband named it, because that kept getting in the way of our conversations. Like, my husband would just be trying to enjoy me. I mean, not that he's perfect and he has his own problems, but he was just being a good guy and trying to have conversations with me or address things with me that maybe I could, do better because, like I was a stay-at-home mom. He was he went to work or whatever, and I came into the marriage like I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know how to clean. I, would very much like disassociated a lot. So that caused problems. And so he worked all day and he had a right to, comment or even just like give helpful hints and things like that or helpful things or whatever that want to do that house. And I didn't respond very well to it because I would take it as an attack on my intrinsic worth. Like, don't you see how hard I'm working? Or whatever. Like, how dare you suggest that the trash can's right there, that instead of waiting until dinner is completely cooked, that I'd have more room to actually do what I'm doing if I pick up the trash and threw it in the trash can. This was a fight that happened early in our marriage that, like I just totally had a meltdown over that about, that he didn't value me. He didn't see the effort I had put in trying to learn how to cook here. And I just fixated that he suggested the trash because he noticed our kitchen was small and he was actually just trying to be helpful and just point out that I wouldn't have to jam myself in the small corner. I could have this counter if I just threw the trash away. So, and that's what happens when you're viewing things through that lens of being invisible. You don't actually respond to feedback right. Like, since because I took it that way because I was looking for that validation on my worth for his feedback. And I missed that he was just trying to make a little suggestion that he thought would take 5 seconds and would make it easier and stuff because our kitchen was so small. It's not like he was able to come in and help me do anything. That would have been a problem. So that fear really blocks your ability to take in outside feedback and then to be able to appropriately adapt to the world. So like, for example, in that situation, instead of being like, oh, my husband is showing me affection by giving me a solution and I could make my life easier by doing it, which I did end up doing it and it was amazing. And I did thank him for it later, but I missed out on actually the ability to build resilience on being able to take feedback. So instead of like building resilience and realizing I'm taking feedback, I'm adjusting to the world. Oh, this is an area I can look for to notice how to like make my life easier. I took it on and I made it something to feed my anxiety. And that built. And then so instance after instance of that, mainly with a lot of it, it was like, like interactions with my husband, but also interactions with other people, conglomerated into this huge beast narrative of how I'm invisible, about how I don't have intrinsic worth, how everything that I do doesn't matter, that it does, that, whatever, that it doesn't matter how hard I try, I'm not going to get the same rewards for my effort as other people. All this like really nihilistic thinking. And it just kind of kept, it's not like it consumed every part of my life, but it was just this big mass there that could get triggered at any time. So that developed and that kept on going like that until early 30s, actually. And then my husband finally gave the narrative, the beast narrative. And that was really helpful. That was one of my first things that like really helped me get some good progress on developing a better fear with this, the fear of invisibility, because I was able to actually separate myself from my anxiety instead of being like, I feel invisible and being able to do like this story it says I'm invisible here, and actually start looking at it and and seeing what it was. And one of the first things I realized is there was nothing redeemable in that narrative. I wasn't going to be able to fix it or like build off of it to make it better. This beast narrative needed to go away. I needed to start over from scratch. And so starting over scratch really involved, and this is of course a period over years. This isn't like an overnight thing, but I had to really connect and identify with my values. I had to deconstruct that verse about not being able to trust your heart. And so I had to backtrack and figure out how to have even a relationship with myself and actually have some self-trust on basic things rather than constantly self-betraying and betraying my values. And so I had to backtrack through that. And then once I was able to actually connect and feel and hear myself again, I was able to start doing a relationship with my values. For example, personal growth is a very strong value of mine. Like I really, that's just something I'm going to do if people like it or not. You can outlaw it today that you're never allowed to change anything today. It's going to happen anyway. I just don't care. I want to be a person that's constantly growing, and I want to see where I'm going to go. And I'm going to do that if people validate it or not. So that's just like an example of one of my values. So once I was able to start seeing those core values, and then I was able to start going back through in my mind old interactions that I had where I filtered it through that, oh, that person didn't, I sat next to this friend through an entire retreat all weekend and she doesn't even remember I'm there. So being able to filter that through more mundane explanation. We were both pregnant. We both had pregnancy brain. And I was I still had nausea and things like that. So I kept, so while we did eat at meals and everything like that, I wasn't exactly the greatest conversationalist. And I slept a lot when we weren't in sessions and stuff. So of course she didn't remember me. I didn't necessarily make a memorable presence besides the fact that we were both pregnant at the same time. And that wasn't the only event that we did during that time. We were around each other a lot. So of course she didn't remember me. I didn't, I didn't have the energy or thing to do anything memorable. And so, so there's a lot of mundane explanations that you can go back through your past memories and realize, oh, maybe that person was just hungry. Maybe that had nothing to do with me. Maybe I didn't have the skills or the presentations, or I didn't do my part to be memorable. So that's why I'm invisible. And then other times, like, I was invisible because I purposely didn't do my part. And that's what I actually wanted. Because at the end of the day, I wanted to be able to be like, see, they didn't notice me. And I wanted to prove the narrative. So the way I acted, I self-fulfilled the prophecy to be invisible. And so that being able to go through my memories and kind of do that thing and then start applying it present day when things happen and be like, okay, this interaction happened. I'm getting triggered here. I'm feeling invisible. And then being able to be like, okay, what's the mundane explanation? And then just be like that. And sometimes there was an explanation. And then interestingly, I actually found that I have a lot of physical things in my body that would create anxiety over situations that had no basis in the situation. So I kind of was having certain things that were a physical reaction that I was then linking to the situation and making it into a thing that I felt invisible. And the reality was I just have this physical sensation in my body that is totally separate. It had nothing to do with it. So that was another thing that I found. So like, integrate is about working on the body, the mind, and the spirit. So there's a lot of crossover. So sometimes when you find a physical thing, or a mental thing, you have to go take care of that physical thing to actually make progress. And my fear and invisibility was one of those that I had to figure out why I would get this shaky feeling for no reason. And why would that show up in situations where I might feel invisible? And it's because I have a genetic, short story on that is I have a genetic mutation that makes it hard for me to absorb folic acid. So down the chain, it affects my ability to absorb nutrients. So I always have to go find a vitamin that I'm missing when I'm feeling shaky and things like that. And so that was it. I found the right nutrient, and that severely lessened the physical sign. So then just solving the physical thing, with the mental work, really opened the door to not feeling invisible. So just to review, my tips there was to, find that beast narrative, separate it, find your values, and then check in with actually your physical body. And is your physical body actually responding because something's happening, or are you creating a story to justify that sensation? So benefits to this, because let me tell you, I'm not going to lie, this kind of work is not fun. It is not easy. It is not fun to realize your part to feeling invisible when you actually weren't doing the things needed to be noticed, or, and that you were purposely did a self-fulfilling cycle because you actually got something out of being invisible. That isn't fun. It isn't fun to, to feel self-righteous and indignant or whatever when people do something. It's not fun to go back through memories and realize that someone is just hungry and that you made a big deal out of nothing. It's not fun. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience to sit with yourself and filter and get experience and stuff to do it. But the other side is worth it because there is so much more mental energy. Like, I can't even explain to you how much energy actually goes to feeding that beast narrative, because that beast narrative has to be fed a large diet because it isn't actually based in reality. You are having to ignore what actual data that's coming at you. Like, things are being said to you and you have to like manipulate it and take it the wrong way. You're spending all this energy, just warping reality, and so that you're disconnected from reality. And that takes a lot of energy. So while it's a lot of hard work, on the other side is so much more mental freedom and freedom to actually be able to grow in those weaknesses or be able to like see what you need to do to actually make true connections in a neutral way. And so that I've had a lot more peace, ability to be present and just joyful, when I'm not looking for external rewards on something that I'm doing, then I can just enjoy the moment and the fruits of my own labor. And yeah, so it's definitely a more freer, joyful life on the other side of trying to develop a better relationship with the fear of invisibility instead of letting those maladaptive narratives just take over and run the show. So that is my personal story. Those are the tips I use that personally helped me and why I share them. And then also, at least for my words, that you can see what that I can just at least tell you, because I can't necessarily show you, except for the fact that I'm here talking and doing this video, that it is worth it to go to the other side. Yes, you have to go through the valley, but there is a peak on the other side. So I hope you find that encouraging, and I hope that helps. Please check out the rest of our Adapting to Fear series. We got the fear of uncertainty, the fear of the mundane, the fear of being fatally flawed. And we have personal stories and explanations and some artistic creations. We also have an integrated thought playlist that is just general ideals for integrate. And then we also have our integrate tips. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in another. Have a great rest of your day.